Now that we can perform calculations and display the results, it's time to move on to see how we can get Python to make decisions and perform tasks repeatedly. Like many programming languages, Python works in blocks of code. One of the design principles of Python, though, was that it should be uncluttered and easy to read. Because of this, Python doesn't use delimiters around blocks of code. If you've used other programming languages, you may be used to seeing braces, that's the left and right curly braces, or begin and end around code. Python doesn't use anything like that, but instead uses indentation to indicate when a new block starts. I've opened the exchange_chart program in IntelliJ so that I've got some code to talk about. Now you won't need this file in your project. We're not going to be running it in this section. This is one of the few times in the course when you won't be typing along. So relax, sit back and watch the video as I show you blocks of code in this program. Alright, so let's look at the blocks of code in this program. Firstly, starting on line 66, we've got a for loop. That starts a new code block, and we can see that line 67 through to lines 82, which is just off screen. Well, it's actually on screen, but I'll move it up a little bit more, like so. So you can see those lines, 67 to 82, they're all part of that code block, which is the for loop defined on line 66. Now, I don't want you to try and understand the code here because most of it probably won't make sense at this point in the course. You should be able to work out that line 67, though, is using replacement fields. And I'll just move that over a little bit more so we can see it. And it's using a replacement field to put the year and month at the end of that URL. But most of this code in general will be confusing. And that's fine. What we're interested in though at the moment are the various levels of indentation. So concentrate on the shape of the code and we'll learn what it all means in due course. Alright, so we've got a block of code from line 67 through to and including lines 82. We can make it easier to see the blocks by turning off indentation guides. Now most modern IDEs will have a similar feature. In IntelliJ, you go into settings. Now that's preferences if you're using a Mac. In my case, I'm on a Windows machine, and it'll be the same for Linux, File. I'm going to select Settings. Once you then navigate to Editor, then down to General, and then here into Appearance. And you want to make sure that the Show Indent Guides is actually checked. So I'm going to check that now. Click OK. And you can see now that IntelliJ draws guides to show the indentation levels. You can see that slight, really grey, light grey line now in the indentation. So line 67 and line 69 are indented one level. So below that, line 70 is indented another level. Line 72 is also at that second level. And so are all the lines 74 to 79. And you can see there's a third level of indentation on lines 80 through 82. So each level of indentation is a new block of code. So let's see them again. The main code has no indentation and starts up against the left margin. Lines 67 to 82 are all part of another block of code and are indented one level. The convention is to indent 4 spaces at a time. Within that second block, we have other blocks for lines 70 and 72 and also lines 74 to 82. And finally, there's a fourth block, lines 80 to 82. So that's how we create blocks of code in Python. Now, I haven't explained why you want to do that. At the moment, we're looking at what a code block is. So as you can see, a block of code can contain other blocks. We start a new code block by indenting the code. Now, have you noticed anything else about the lines that start a new code block? Well, lines 66, 69, 71, 73, and 79 all start a new code block. If you examine those lines carefully, hopefully you can spot something that they all have in common. Did you spot it? Well, all those lines end in a colon. Whenever a line ends with a colon, Python will expect a new code block to follow it. That means that the next line must be indented. When you've finished all the code for a block, you remove the indentation for the next line. The blocks of code on lines 67 to 82 finish with line 82 because the indentation for the next line is removed, and you can see that line 84, right towards the bottom of the screen, isn't indented. Line 72 is a code block containing only one line. Line 73 is indented back one level. There's another code block a bit further down. I'm going to scroll that so you can see it, and it's the block of code on lines 87 to 88. You can see those there. only those two lines are indented, which means only those two lines are part of the for loop. Once again, don't worry about the code, just concentrate on how indentation is used to create a new code block. We're learning why in the rest of this section. Alright, so that's the end of the demonstration and what code blocks are. Next we'll see how to create them. So I've created a new project for this section and I've called the project Program Flow, which probably isn't very imaginative. You may want to call your project something else like Flow Control or Program Flow or something of that nature, or something that makes sense. I'm going to close this file now because we are done with it for now. And close it down. So what I'm going to do is click on my project to open it. I'm going to right click it, select New, Python file, and let's go with the name Blocks. Right, and I'll just close down the project pane to make a bit of space. Now I'm going to start with some code that we've seen before. It still won't make sense, but it will let us see how to create a code block. So I'm going to type on the first line for I in range, parentheses, 1, 13, right parentheses, and a colon. Now when I type that colon, IntelliJ IDE is showing an error. If I hover the mouse over it, you can see a description and it says indent expected. So if I then press enter here, you see that the error has now moved to the next line. And that can be very confusing. You've hardly typed anything and you've already got an error. Don't worry, you will sometimes get things like this until you finish typing the code. IntelliJ is trying to make sense of code that isn't finished yet and it gets a bit confused. And most IDEs will do the same thing if they provide syntax checking while you type like IntelliJ is doing. Helpfully though, IntelliJ has automatically indented that new line when I pressed enter. So when I start typing print, you can see there that it was already indented for us. I'm going to finish this line, print, left parentheses, double quotes, no, we'll put number or NO for short, period, then left to right curly braces, squared is, and left to right curly braces again, and cubed is, and we're going to left and right curly braces again, but within those we're going to put :4. We have talked about this in the previous section. Finishing off the double quote and put dot format, parentheses, I, star 2, I, star 3, and 2 right parentheses to finish the line. Note that that's now cleared the error, and notice also that the cursor is automatically positioned when I press enter now at the same level of indentation. Now if we wanted more code inside the loop, we just keep typing. There's only one line I want in this block, so we're going to use the backspace key now to delete the indentation. And you can see just one backspace went right back to the start. Now if you want to indent again, press the tab key. Notice that the IDE adds 4 spaces and removes 4 spaces when I use backspace again. So it knows, in other words, that we're in a code block and automatically adds the correct number of spaces for us. Now you can also select a line of code and use Shift Tab to remove a level of indentation. To see what I mean, I'm going up to line 2. I'm going to hold down Shift and press Tab. I can indent it again with Tab, Shift Tab to remove the indentation, and Tab again to add it. Alright, so moving on to the next line now. Line 3, I'm going to type print, parentheses, double quotes, and put an asterisk in the double quotes, then multiplied by 80, right parentheses. Now if I run this program, we can see we get the squares and cubes printed, followed by a line of asterisks. So the block of code inside that for loop executes 12 times, but we only get a single line of asterisks at the end, and that's because line 3 isn't part of the block. However, we can make it part of the block by tabbing it across. So we'll come over here on line 3 and tab it over, so it's now indented at the same line or same level as line 2. If we run the program again, notice that we get a very different result this time. The output's very different, as you can see there. Both lines are now part of the same block, and therefore both lines get executed 12 times. Alright, so that's how we create a code block using the tab key to indent the code. We're also starting to see why we might want to do that. We get very different results when we include line 3 in the block compared to having it outside of the block. The code still won't make a lot of sense. What are for and range? Well, that's some of the things we'll be looking at in the rest of this section. But now that we understand what code blocks are, we can start to use them in our code. We'll make a start on that when we look at telling Python how to make decisions in the next video.